It started with a sound, a soft creak from the attic floorboard, that Rumer Willis had heard 1,000 times as a child, but hadn't listened to in years. The Idaho ranch where she grew up with her famous parents, Bruce Willis and Demi Moore, was quieter now. Dust lingered in the sunbeams cutting through the wooden rafters, and the air smelled like cedar and thyme. She had returned home alone, seeking something she couldn't quite name. Closure, clarity, maybe just connection. As she pushed aside a stack of old blankets and a cracked leather suitcase, her fingers grazed something solid. She tugged at it, revealing a wooden box no larger than a carry-on. Carved into the lid were the words, "To our future selves, Bruce and Demi, 1995. Her breath caught. She wiped away the dust and stared at it, stunned. What could possibly be inside a time capsule her parents had made 3 decades ago? Before we discover what lies inside this mysterious time capsule, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more incredible stories like this one. She hesitated, brushing her hand across the aged wood. It felt sacred somehow, as if time itself had held its breath for this moment. The latch was rusty, the corners worn. She remembered being 6 years old, running barefoot through the halls, her dad humming blues on his harmonica, her mum scribbling in journals on the porch. Back then, magic was real. Rumer wasn't a child anymore. Life had taken turns, some expected, many not. Her father's recent health struggles had weighed heavily on all of them. She found herself returning more and more to the past, searching for fragments of who they had been, who she had been. She carried the box downstairs into the sunlit kitchen and set it on the old farmhouse table. She debated calling her sisters Scout and Tallulah, but something held her back. Maybe this first unveiling needed to be hers alone. She owed that to herself and maybe even to her parents. With trembling hands, she pried open the latch. It creaked, resisting for a second before giving way. The inside smelled faintly of vanilla and aged paper. Everything was carefully arranged, wrapped in tissue and bound with string. A letter sat on top. In Demi's handwriting, "To our children, when the time is right." Her heart skipped. She unfolded it gently. The ink had faded slightly, but her mother's voice echoed clearly through the words. It spoke of dreams they had as young parents, of the love they poured into each moment, and how one day their children might need a reminder of what mattered most. Rumer blinked back tears. Beneath the letter were more parcels. One had her name on it, another bore Scout's, a third, Tallulah's. There were photographs, drawings, a toy horse she recognized from their living room shelf. It was like the past had reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. She picked up a small cassette tape labeled "For You from Dad." Her fingers trembled. She hadn't seen a cassette in years, much less held one that might carry her father's voice from before everything changed. Suddenly, the room felt different, warmer, closer. The capsule wasn't just a box of memories, it was a bridge, a doorway to understanding and maybe healing. And yet, there was more. At the very bottom, hidden beneath the tissue paper, lay a smaller, sealed envelope. It bore a warning in Bruce's handwriting. "Only open when the world feels uncertain." Rumer stared at it, heart thudding. She didn't know what it meant yet, but she felt the weight of its message already. Something told her this was only the beginning. Rumer sat in silence, the envelope still in her hands, but her attention drawn back to the neatly packed contents of the box. She set the envelope aside for now, placing it gently on the table as though it might dissolve if touched too soon. What she needed now was to see, to feel, to remember. The first thing she unwrapped was a bundle of letters, each one in a different envelope, labeled with names and dates. Her fingers stopped on the one with her name, Rumer, age 7 and beyond. Her parents had written directly to her. She held the letter close for a moment, then carefully slid it open. The handwriting danced across the page in both her mother's looping script and her father's bold print. They had taken turns writing, each offering a slice of themselves. Demi's words were full of warmth and wonder, reflecting on Rumer's early fascination with music and her curious spirit. Bruce, in his usual tone of dry humor mixed with fatherly wisdom, reminded her of their harmonica jam sessions and his belief that she'd always march to her own beat, and that was a good thing. She smiled, laughed, then wiped away tears as she read. The letter didn't just speak to her as a child, it spoke to who she had become. They had seen her even then. Beneath the letters were objects that could have been discarded as junk, but here, in this moment, they radiated meaning. A plastic action figure from a movie set, a friendship bracelet made of frayed yarn, a small worn book of fairy tales with the cover barely intact. Each item had a note attached, explaining its origin, its story, its significance. It was like decoding her family's secret language. One parcel contained a faded Polaroid of all 5 of them, Bruce, Demi, Rumer, Scout, and baby Tallulah, posed in front of a snowman they had built one chaotic winter. On the back, Bruce had scrawled, "The best things melt, but the memories don't." Rumer closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the ache of love that stretches across decades. She reached for the harmonica next, nestled beside a small cassette tape marked Christmas '96. The harmonica was tarnished with age, but she remembered its sound. That bluesy wail had echoed through her childhood. Her father would play it after dinner, improvising silly songs that made them all giggle until they couldn't breathe. The tape was something else. She didn't have a player for it nearby, but she didn't need to listen yet. Just knowing it existed was enough for now. Her father's voice was preserved, waiting. Then she noticed something else. A drawing, clearly done by a child's hand, of their family holding hands under a rainbow. Her name was scribbled in big, uneven letters across the top. She had drawn this. Her parents had kept it, cherished it, and returned it to her decades later as a symbol of that moment. She sat back overwhelmed. Her chest was tight, but not from sadness. This was something else, something like awe. She had found a portal, a living archive of love, frozen in time and now awakened. And then she saw it again. That sealed envelope. Only open when the world feels uncertain. Rumer picked it up once more, holding it to her heart. Her fingers didn't tremble this time. Not yet ready to open it, but ready to listen. Something told her the capsule wasn't just filled with relics. It held intentions. And maybe answers. Night had fallen by the time Rumer returned to the envelope. The ranch was quiet again, as if the house itself was holding its breath. She sat on the floor beside the fireplace, the envelope in her lap, its weight growing heavier by the second. The words, "Only open when the world feels uncertain," had haunted her all day. What did her father mean when he wrote them? What version of uncertainty had he imagined? In recent years, their family had weathered storms they never saw coming. Bruce's public diagnosis had shaken their foundation, and for Rumer, becoming a mother herself had opened doors she didn't know existed, into fear, into wonder, into vulnerability. She broke the seal. The letter inside was different from the others. It wasn't playful or full of inside jokes. It was written with a deep awareness, like a message sent from one edge of time to the other. Her father's handwriting filled the page, steady and reflective. He wrote of legacy, not as something left behind, but something carried forward in choices, in values, in the quiet strength to keep going when things no longer made sense. He spoke of change, how it comes like winter, cold and relentless, but that spring always follows, even if it's slow. He admitted his own fears, not of dying, but of forgetting. Forgetting the people he loved, forgetting who he was. "If one day I forget my words," he wrote, "I hope you'll remember my heart." Tears spilled freely down Rumer's face as she read. Her father had written this before he knew what his future would look like, but somehow he had known. And he hadn't left fear in the letter. He had left hope, strength, permission to keep living. Tucked into the envelope was a second, smaller sheet, a hand-drawn map. It outlined a portion of the ranch property near the edge of the woods. A red X was marked beside an old tree house. Alongside it was a small brass key labeled Summer 1994. Rumer stared at the map, her heart pounding. She remembered that summer. They'd built the treehouse together, her dad hammering beams while she and Scout handed him nails. She hadn't climbed it in years. What could possibly be hidden out there? With the key in one hand and the map in the other, she pulled on boots and a jacket. The wind outside was sharp, but she barely noticed. Her flashlight beam cut through the dark as she followed the path she had walked so many times as a girl. Leaves rustled. A branch snapped beneath her feet. The treehouse came into view, its wooden frame still intact but softened by time. Near the base of the tree, just behind a moss-covered stone, she found it, a small metal latch, nearly invisible against the bark. The key fit perfectly. The hidden compartment creaked open. Inside was a weatherproof locker wrapped in thick plastic. She hauled it out, brushing away dirt and leaves. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at it. This was more than a secret. It was a legacy her parents had buried long before she'd learned the value of remembering. She didn't open it yet, not tonight, because she knew now. This wasn't just about finding pieces of her parents' past. It was about uncovering who they were when no one was watching, and maybe who she had been all along. Morning light filtered through the trees as Rumer returned to the treehouse, the hidden locker balanced in her arms. Her muscles ached from the weight, but her spirit felt lighter. She brought it inside, set it on the wooden floor, and knelt beside it. No fanfare, no hesitation. She opened the lid. Inside, everything was meticulously organized. Ziploc bags containing old videotapes, stacks of handwritten pages, drawings, and envelopes worn soft by time. The smell of cedar and age rose again, grounding her in the moment. These weren't just mementos, they were confessions, offerings. She reached for a VHS tape first, labeled "To Our Girls, Summer '94. A note was taped to it, her mother's handwriting. "Watch together when you're ready. But even alone, you'll feel us." She knew she'd need to find a way to play it, but the presence of it alone felt like a lifeline. She set it aside with care, then pulled out a bundle of papers tied with ribbon. A journal. It wasn't a typical diary, but a shared notebook, passed between Bruce and Demi during the years they were still together. Its pages were full of entries, short reflections, dreams, and moments they'd written to remember. Demi had chronicled Rumer's first day of school in vivid detail, down to the color of the bow in her hair and the look on Bruce's face as he watched her walk away. Bruce had written about sneaking cookies with Scout at midnight, or the way Tallulah once called him Captain Dad and saluted. These weren't stories told in interviews. These were the sacred ones, the kind that parents usually carry silently. Rumer laughed out loud reading one passage about an epic living room dance party, then found herself in tears over a letter her mother had written but never sent. It spoke of fear, of not knowing how to be everything her daughters needed, but promising to never stop trying. There were drawings too, pages filled with scribbles and illustrations made by all three sisters, saved over the years, annotated with dates and ages. Tallulah's first attempt at a rainbow, 1996. Rumer's dream house, complete with pet elephant, age 9. Every page was a window, every artifact a heartbeat. Near the bottom of the locker was something unexpected, a sealed envelope addressed to "the three of you." Rumer paused. This wasn't meant for her alone. It was time. She called Scout first, then Tallulah. The sisters arrived later that afternoon, eyes wide with disbelief as Rumer explained what she'd found. Together, they opened the envelope. Inside were copies of a photo they'd never seen. Bruce and Demi, seated on a porch swing, their heads pressed together, smiling with a tenderness that could only belong to two people who had loved deeply, no matter how their story changed. The letter enclosed was short. It spoke of forgiveness, of letting go of mistakes, of holding on to each other no matter where life pulled them. "Family isn't perfect," it read, "but it's forever, and so are you." They sat in silence, each one holding a piece of the past. Then, one by one, they began to talk. About childhood, about their parents, about things they had forgotten or buried. And then they laughed. Real, belly-deep laughter that only siblings can summon, the kind that heals. That night, surrounded by the voices of their parents echoing from the past, they realized something profound. Love doesn't live in memories. It lives in the act of remembering. Rumer stood at the window of her father's house, the sun setting low behind the trees. In her hands was the cassette tape she had found days earlier, marked with her father's handwriting, frozen in a time before life had grown heavy. She had finally tracked down an old player. The tape hissed softly as it started. Then came the sound. Bruce's voice, warm and unmistakable, filled the room. "Hey kid," it began. "If you're hearing this, it means you've opened the box. And if you've opened the box, maybe things feel a little uncertain. Maybe life's thrown you sideways, but let me tell you something." Rumer listened, not moving. The voice continued, casual and tender, filled with stories and advice. He spoke about music, about taking chances, about not letting fear steal joy. He spoke like a father talking to a daughter, across years and miles and memory. She brought the tape to Bruce later that week. His condition made communication harder now. Words often came slowly, or not at all. But when she placed the headphones on his ears, something shifted. His eyes lit up. Recognition, emotion. He didn't say a word, but he didn't need to. The expression in his eyes told her everything. The voice from the past had found him in the present. They sat together for a long time, no rush, no noise. It was the closest thing to a conversation they'd had in months. Rumer felt something settle inside her, something that had been restless and searching. She had found what she didn't know she needed. The time capsule had started as a mystery, but it had become a mirror, not only into her parents' lives, but into her own. She saw the legacy they had left, not in fame or fortune, but in presence, in intention, in love that had been carefully wrapped and buried for decades, waiting for the moment she was ready. One afternoon, the sisters gathered again. They watched the VHS tape together, tears falling freely as Bruce and Demi appeared on screen, younger and brighter, laughing into the camera. "We're doing this for you," Bruce said, "because one day you'll want to remember where you came from and who you are." Demi leaned into him and added, "You'll face hard days, but you'll never face them alone. Not really." After the video ended, silence held the room like a soft blanket. Then Rumer stood. "I think it's time we make one of our own." They agreed. Over the next few weeks, the sisters worked together to create a new time capsule. They filled it with letters for future generations, photos from the present, videos of laughter, and messages of love. It wasn't about preserving the past this time. It was about honoring it by continuing the story. And when they buried the new capsule beneath the same old tree, they smiled through tears. Legacy wasn't a thing left behind. It was something passed on by choice, by love, by memory. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and click the video on screen to uncover more hidden legacies that defy time. Some stories never end. They just begin again,